Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 17 of Impactful Conversations, which is a platform to educate and inspire. Today, I'm joined by Danielle Weakley. She's the editor in chief of Women's Health, Men's Health, and Go Hustle. She has over 20 years of experience in the media industry, initially working as a writer and editor. She now oversees strategy, marketing, and creative content for print, digital social media, influencers, and live events for two wellness and fitness brands, as well as female focused empowerment and an entrepreneurial platform as well. It's a it's a privilege to have you here, Danielle, in the virtual room with me today and with all the listeners. We really are honored to have you here with us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Stefan. It's really, really good to be here with you
Awesome.
virtually.
Awesome. Yeah, virtually. We don't have a choice right now. So
As good as it gets.
it's as good as it gets, right? So, Danielle, as we sort of typically start the show, we want to get to know you a little bit better. Um, so quick summary, just tell us, who are you? Well, we probably know who you are, but where are you from, and what are you passionate about?
So, I am Danielle Weakley. I was born in Joburg, but I currently live in Cape Town. We moved about 5 years ago, actually, when I picked up the position of Women's Health Editor. So,
Mm,
Grazia was a magazine that I'd been with before then, and that was always Joburg based. I am a dyed in the wool Joburg girl. I never thought I would leave that glorious city. And here I am in the shadow of the mountain, wondering what on earth I was thinking. I've always loved magazines. I've loved reading my whole life. I have a passion for words. Um, I don't know that I ever really thought that I would end up in magazines because I'm not sure who ever really thinks that they would, but I think I have the best job in the world.
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a Joburg boy at heart, so I can follow.
You see.
I spent 4 years in Cape Town, and I was like, "Oh, this is nice," but I don't think I'll ever live here. But I wouldn't be shocked if things change somewhere along the
No,
line.
that's it. I mean, I never thought I would leave the energy of Joburg, and now I'm so namaste at that mountain and those good vibes.
Yeah. Hey. So,
It
Danielle,
creeps up on you.
I want us to talk a little bit about your journey through your career. So we're gonna dive straight into it. Then, you know,
Cool.
we're gonna tone it down a little bit later, but let's dive straight into your career. Right? You actually started your career out in writing. I want to know firstly, how did that evolve from writing to, strategy marketing and creative content?
I mean, I think a lot of that is really just time in the game. So for me, being a writer was the start. And I guess at the beginning of your career, you haven't really got to the point where you know enough about the industry that you're in to kind of see where it's going to lead. So I loved writing. I desperately wanted to be a journalist, but I knew very early on that I wanted to be a lifestyle journalist. So at that stage, that would have meant working in magazines. It was far more the content that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed working with commercial clients as well as working with interview subjects and all those sort of things. So it was kind of a natural progression for me, starting as a writer and moving my way up through magazines to eventually get to the point where that role has evolved so much more beyond writing into creating things that are more than just what you put on the page.
Yeah.
So it always was about content for me, but content has become something that means a lot of different things across a lot of different platforms these days.
Mm.
Right down into experiential content and creating events to content like this, where you're on a virtual live conversation. And I guess that's what really thrilled me about it as I got further in my career, and you kind of get good at something and you want to move on to the next thing. And I sort of naturally then ended up getting more involved in creative strategy and those sort of things.
Mm. So I find that so interesting, right? And I think you're quite right that I think content is takes place in many forms and is constantly evolving as well, which I think
Mm.
makes it an incredibly exciting space as well to be in. Let's take it a little bit back. So you actually studied political science, as
Yeah.
I so I'm curious, even so way back then. So way
How did
back
we
to
get here?
how did we get to media? All right. So how did we get from political science to media?
So
I'm so
I'll tell
curious.
you.
Mm,
I I was always very, I thought of myself as being very liberal when I was in high school,
mm,
and I wanted to change the world. And I thought that the way that I would be able to do that would be by writing for newspapers
yeah,
and telling people stories. But I always thought of it as a news position.
okay.
And at the time when I finished school in the early 1990s, and I desperately wanted to go to Grahamstown and study to be a journalist. And my strict Lebanese father took one
Mm,
look at me and said, "Oh, my dear, you are not leaving home to go and study somewhere else. You may pick from close by where you will still be under my roof." And that led me to Wits, the University of the Witwatersrand, and I ended up studying politics. And the thinking behind me studying politics then was that I felt like it would be an opportunity to still get into news media.
okay.
Um, it was an amazing time to be at Wits, and it was certainly an amazing time to be studying politics in this country, particularly because I started university in 1993. So
Mm,
it was a really, really interesting, uncomfortable time to be a student. There was a huge youth movement. That's obviously where all the radicalism was happening,
yeah.
and I was in the heart of all of it. And so
Mm,
I left university with my political science degree thinking I was going to be a very, very strict news journalist. And no sooner had I started doing that I realized actually it was much more fun writing about lifestyle things. And my tone is much more conversational, and I think it always has been.
mm,
And I quite quickly moved from news into writing for lifestyle content for the newspapers. And that's kind of where my career really started.
mm.
And I
Yeah,
never looked back.
and that's such an interesting. I love the part where you talked about telling people stories, and communicating that as an important message, for people to take in and to read. But I also think what you learned probably gives you a lot of context in the industry that you're in currently as well. And what you
I,
study does definitely, I think, give you a lot of context that is absolutely necessary, to be in that industry as well. Let's talk into. I want to dive a little bit into Grazia magazine, right? So
yes.
at the time that you're part of the launch of it, and the market, was and still is, fiercely competitive. I want to understand, firstly, what made you take the step, um, and secondly, why do you think it was so successful as well?
So, I mean, this is also bearing in mind now that we're talking about the girl who thought she was going to be a hard news journalist who is now launching a weekly fashion glossy. So we've
Yeah.
come a long way. But what I what I loved about Grazia, and I think it was something that I found was particularly unusual in women's magazines at the time. And it's
Mm,
quite hard to imagine that now because I think a lot of women's magazines have become a lot smarter. Not, I mean, smart is such a patronizing thing to say, but
mm,
not smarter, but there's a lot more content outside of maybe just fashion and beauty or lifestyle features and things like that. And what Grazia did really brilliantly at the time, their ethos was news with shoes. So the idea was that you got a very glossy package but very smart, quite hard hitting content in amongst all of that. So, along with the celebrity and the fashion and the beauty, there were also very strong female led stories. And I loved that idea. So, I'd always been a big fan of the magazine, um, reading it over the years. When it launched in the UK, I adored it. And it was one of those like great traditions of like if you went overseas, the first thing I did was at pick up a Grazia magazine at Heathrow Airport as soon as I landed.
mm,
So when I knew that they were launching in South Africa, I was honestly probably in magazines. I felt like I was their biggest fan, and
mm,
it was the perfect job for me at the perfect time. It was a fiercely competitive market at that stage in terms of weekly magazines. There was Heat, UA, and Drum, and a whole lot of those that still, many of which still exist today. But there was
yeah.
nothing I felt that spoke to a reader like me that wanted a more glossy package, but still wanted a weekly fix. And
Yes.
bearing in mind that this all came before Instagram, which now makes me sound like I'm 107, but you weren't getting that fix, that immediacy of fashion and
Yes.
celebrity fix that you now get on social media.
Yes.
So what Grazia did was package that all up and give it to you weekly. So you didn't have
Mm,
to wait for a monthly magazine. You didn't have to kind of try and find it on the back page of the Sunday Times. It was
mm,
this beautiful package with newsy, celebrity, and fashion content. So
yeah.
I was so up for that challenge, and I loved that magazine.
It was. I mean, if we really talk about it, right? It was at the at the time it was innovational, right? It was groundbreaking
It
to
was. It
actually do that because that
it
wasn't
was
the norm,
amazing.
and I
They
absolutely loved
and
it.
it was so amazing to be part of something new. It was the first time in my career, and in fact, actually, the only time now that I think about it, it's the only time that I, as an editor, worked on a launch magazine. So being the person to send it off on its first
Yeah.
flight. So
Yes.
setting up an entire magazine with my own team. We were dealing very closely with the Grazia international team who were based in Milan. So the
Mhm.
magazine launched at Milan Fashion Week with
I-
Kippy there with all the celebs, which was hilarious. Um, their South African import to Milan Fashion Week. Um, but it was incredible. Like you were part of this world that was just, I mean, amazing to, they were so excited to finally have an African publication that was
yeah.
part of their global books as well. So there was this amazing, very dynamic energy between the brands. It was an
Mm,
incredible time to be on a magazine like that.
And so, as I understand the magazine, it's aimed, at celebrating, female-led stories, right? And I want to ask you, how important do you think that is, to provide that platform? And as time has gone on, I know that has evolved in its manifestation, but I want to actually address the foundation of it. How important do you think that need is for us to provide that platform?
I think it is absolutely enormous. It's imperative that we tell those kind of stories. I think it is so important to be able to show young girls or anybody really an opportunity to hold a mirror up and say there are women out there doing amazing things and you can be just like that. Like
Mm,
to be able to tell women's stories that give hope, inspiration. That I think women have got a far more emotional take on their journeys, so they're much more real and much more authentic in the retelling of their stuff. So they talk about the hardships. It's not always like a big bravado success story, like where the
yeah,
negatives get glossed over. I
yeah,
think women are incredibly real about the struggles that they have gone through to get where they are. And that
yeah,
is the part that I love about telling those stories. You can grow up feeling like you can do anything in the world, but to be able to see other women who have done it and are doing it just gives you so much power to grab by the horns and go for it. And that
yeah.
for me media is doing in that space. It's
Mm,
telling those incredible stories. And it's
mm,
the part that I love the most. The celebrity side of it actually was quite an interesting take for me. And it's something that looking back on it in my career has changed an enormous amount over time. And
mm.
something that I'm probably not that proud of now that I look back on it. But
That's interesting.
international celebrity stories in those in those celebrity news things, well,
Yeah.
often the point of view was to tell a story where, like, oh, celebrities are just like us. So they also feel heartbroken. They break up with their boyfriends. They fight with their friends. They also go on a big bender of a night out and they get drunk and fall out of the cab and do stupid things and whatever. And
Yeah.
I look back on those things now and I can't believe that often those magazines were leading with those stories. It was like the sort of heartbroken star story, which I
Yes.
think is so dated now. Like you don't see those things anymore.
You don't.
Um, those stories are so positive now, and it's not to say that they aren't going on, but everyone has chosen to focus on how like it's bloody hard work being those people out there in the world, and it's not that they're infallible, but they have got amazing journeys to tell, and you want to celebrate that and not find the one little time that their boyfriend dumped them and they're falling apart at the seams and you're like, oh look, they're just like us, their boyfriend also dumped them. And that point of view has changed a lot over the last 15 years. And I
Yeah.
think that social media has a lot to answer for there because those those same prominent, whether they're celebrities or now influencers or whoever they might be, have been
Mm.
able to take they've been able to take ownership of their own narrative via their own channels and direct the conversations for better or for worse. I think sometimes they also manipulate them to serve themselves.
Yeah.
It means that you talk about the stories that you want to talk about.
Mm. And I think you really touch on the power of the example, right? The power of one story, which I think is actually so incredible. So when a young girl does look at somebody else who has succeeded in that field, it does change the perspective to say that this is possible, and that I can do
Totally.
it too as well. And I think that's where we really talk about representation, and that's where we really talk about actually amplifying those stories as well, and getting them
100%.
out far and wide, which is absolutely critical and important. um I want to talk about a little bit about so you were as being the launch editor in chief, as it were, when Grazia actually went on, right? I want to juxtapose that with where you are now, right? Where I'm now talking particularly sort of women's health, men's health are sort of established
Hmm.
magazines.
Yes.
um we'll talk a little bit about Go Hustle in a second, right?
Sure.
um I want to juxtapose that between so being the launch editor in chief of something which did not exist, right?
Mm.
And you're coming into you're actually trying to create something and build something, and juxtaposing that with being editor in chief of something which does exist and does have a brand. I actually just want to understand from you, the learnings, particularly from those sort of two streams. What do you think? What have you learned in those two processes?
So I think for me, being the launch editor on Grazia made for a very operational role. Um,
Mm.
it was because it was the start of everything. It was new for all of us, and I really felt a responsibility to my team to be able to hold space for them in that way. So to have their backs on what was always a very tight deadline that none of them were used to. We were suddenly producing content for a weekly deadline when all of the team had come from monthlies.
Yeah.
Um, and it made for it being, I mean, the best way to describe it is operational. So where I was involved in Grazia on the smallest little detail, and just keeping that team together. And my main responsibility, I always felt in the beginning with that magazine, was to allow all of them the chance to grow, but hold them all together because I knew it was going to be tough.
Mm.
The real privilege in stepping onto an established brand, and quite a mature brand, and one that already has quite a senior team that's quite au fait with the content, is that you as the editor gets a chance to be so much more creative about what you're doing, because
Mm.
that is a well-oiled machine. You roll into something that is already set up and running, so you don't
Mm.
need to worry about the nuts and bolts of making sure that every last little thing of the basic product is running smoothly because it's already running. So it gave me the opportunity on women's health to think outside of print and outside of traditional media. And
Mm.
it gave us the chance to launch projects like Fit Night Out and Chase the Sun. And we launched bookazines and pay gates. And we created a whole community of readers outside of just print. And I don't think that on a launch that is
Yeah.
as possible to do, because you kind of just need to get the basics right when you're doing a
Yeah.
launch.
Yes. Yeah. That's actually so insightful and so interesting, because you actually have a bit more time, to actually look at the strategy, as it were, and actually say, okay, but which direction is the ship going? Because the
What
ship
now? Yes.
the ship is moving, right? Whereas launching, you're kind of building the ship as you go
You're
along.
building the ship. Yes.
It's like, well, let's make sure the ship doesn't sink, right?
That's
And I
exactly
think
it. So you
I
can't
think
also be pushing the ship in a direction when it hasn't, like, it's not strong enough to go yet.
exactly. I think that also touches into the entrepreneurial side of things. Where in an entrepreneurial sense, when you're starting a business or you're starting an initiative or you're starting anything, the initial pains, as it were, of actually getting that ship steady, and every every second day or so it feels like the ship is sinking because
Yeah.
there's that part that you forgot about or that you did last week but you didn't do this week. So that's incredibly interesting. Let's talk Go Hustle, right? So
Yes.
that's a current venture of yours, which I know that you're quite passionate about. And I think it really does have an extremely important role to play. Um, Firstly, for somebody who doesn't know what Go Hustle is, not me because I have known for quite
I'm
some
ready for
time.
you.
Um, but for somebody who doesn't know what Go Hustle is all about, what would you describe it as, and what would you say its purpose is?
So we launched Go Hustle. It's a digitally led platform supported by social media and newsletters and events, created specifically to empower and inspire young women in their careers and their entrepreneurial journeys.
Yes.
I found working on women's health that we focused so much in that empowerment space, but from a very body positive, emotional wellness point of view, and not necessarily always from a financial and careers point of view. And when I
Mm,
really looked into it and I saw the number of young girls who were trying to get into a very crowded, very competitive marketplace, and they just didn't have the connections or the network, they didn't necessarily have the confidence or skills to make that first break, or if they were in a job and desperately wanting to kind of get going with their side hustle, they weren't sure where to turn, because I think the younger you are, the less of a network you have. And
mm,
even for me in my own career when I was young, we were fortunate enough then that the world was a lot more analog. So I had the opportunity to, in my early career, be out and about a lot because you were interviewing people face to face. I was going to launches, I was being invited to things in real life. Now your whole network sits online.
yeah.
And there's a layer between that means that when you want to access them, you're not really sure how. And I hated that feeling that I felt like those young girls had, that they weren't able to move past that. And we
Mm,
really wanted to create a safe female space for that, because I thought like the dudes kind of had that. If you went to like something after work, it was often a whole lot of guys and it
yes.
didn't really feel like your space.
Mm,
So we wanted to create a millennial female space for those kind of conversations,
mm,
and as an opportunity also to shine the light on amazing, particularly Black female entrepreneurs in this country who were doing such cool things and could offer so much life advice to a younger generation,
yeah.
on how they did it. And that's
Mm,
what we wanted to create.
I think it's exceptional. I
It's
really,
kind of what
really
you're doing with your impactful conversations. It's giving people access to
exactly,
other interesting people.
exactly, absolutely. And I think there's such a need for that, right? In society. And I mean, I absolutely love what what Go Hustle is doing, and I absolutely love
Good.
that it emboldens. I think that it transfers as well into the people that engage with it. So for anybody who doesn't know about it, where can they find out more? I know that website
So, yes,
pod.
gohustle.co.za is the website, and you can follow us on Instagram, which is gohustle_ZA. Those are the two best spots. We've actually also launched a podcast, but you'll find those episodes on the website as well. And we're
Awesome.
just starting. It's just it's a beautiful, safe space to be inspired.
Absolutely, I think it's exceptional, absolutely exceptional. All right, let's slow down a little bit. We started off
Okay.
fairly. We dived right into your life story, and
It's all good.
so let's tone it down a little bit. I want us to get to know you a little bit better, and for you to take us a little bit, on your sort of typical daily journey. So what is a typical day in Danielle Weakley's life like? I think specifically, let's actually divide that into two parts. So I actually want to know pre global pandemic, what was that
Oh,
like?
thank goodness, because It's a very boring day these days.
And also, I want to talk about the boring day as well.
Okay, deal. I'll give you both.
Yeah, also. So, what's a typical day in your life like?
Typical day pre-lockdown, work from home vibes. Was generally spent. So Media 24 has got a big head office at the foreshore in Cape Town,
Yes.
and my team and I are all based there. So as the editor of Women's Health, you can't get away from not exercising. So my day starts with yoga at the Yoga Life studio,
Awesome.
which is near the office. I've got two daughters. They're 12 and 15, so they need to be hustled to school. They're 12 and 15, so they're not getting up in the morning. That's always a joy. And then the rest of my day is spent at the office. We generally, if it's a deadline week, it's very much focused on print and signing off the magazine. But if it's not a deadline week, it's a little bit of everything then. There's a lot of social strategy going on. It's a lot of advertiser client meetings. We run a lot of events for Women's Health as a brand. So there's a lot of work around event planning. We shoot a lot of workout videos. So there's often things like that going on.
Mm.
We obviously have the shoots for the magazine. So chatting to sort of lining up celebrity cover stars and fashion shoots and beauty shoots and all those kind of things. And my first editor did always say to me that no job is all the fun part without any of the schlep. And I've just given you all the fun bits, but there is also a lot of schlep to all of that. There's a lot of boring admin stuff in amongst all of those things, despite the highlights package.
Yeah.
And I feel like probably now that I'm in the middle of a pandemic, it's more of the admin schlep and less of the fun stuff. I think the best part about working on a media brand is working with an amazing team of creatives. The
Mm.
energy that you get from working in a team like that is impossible to replicate, A, on your own, and B, virtually. As
Mm.
much as we all stay connected with one another, it's not the same as the energy of an office space where things are buzzing,
Yeah.
and you're bouncing ideas around naturally without having to send a message to a WhatsApp group that then becomes a Zoom call that then becomes a follow-up email. I mean, that just sucks the joy out of any idea that you could have had, you know.
It definitely is a massive challenge, right? With in the creative space, and I think
For sure.
I think it was actually I saw an Instagram post. I think it was actually your Instagram post where you were saying that you really miss the sort of interaction with people and the
Mm.
event as well. And in that sort of sense, it's very very different right now.
It's
Compared
so
to what,
different.
so it's definitely a a point that we just have to hope and pray that it doesn't last too
Just
long.
keep moving forward. Exactly. Just one step in front of the other. That's exactly
Yeah.
it.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned that your daughters struggle to wake up in the morning. I'm curious about you. Are you a morning or an
Oh.
evening
Those two chicks of mine get it from me.
person?
I I forced myself to be a morning person because otherwise I don't get to exercise.
Yeah.
So I do yoga early in the morning. It's a 6 o'clock in the morning class. So I do get up early to go and exercise, but my choice would never, ever, ever be to get up that early. Ever.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've actually managed to almost teach yourself to
It's
to live
just
it.
it's just a discipline. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I hate saying that because that makes me sound like the 5 a.m. club, like I've just channeled Robin Sharma into like this amazing Zen life, which is not in fact the case at all. But there is otherwise no time to do it. Otherwise, it has to be done. It needs to
I
be
love it.
scheduled in and done. Those are
Yeah.
when people always ask, if you're the editor of Women's Health, people are always going to ask you what your hacks are for ensuring that you exercise. And that is always my hack. It's like
Mm.
schedule it into your day and get it done early so you don't have to think about it again, because otherwise there's always a reason not to.
I,
If you're trying to fit it into your lunch hour or after work or whatever, there are a million other things to do, or life is busy, work is busy. I find if I do that first thing in the day, it sets me up for such a great day.
yeah, I mean, I'm exactly the same. Literally, first thing I do is
Yeah,
exercise every single day and make sure, because you just get that out the way. Like,
it's
okay,
done. Exactly. You're like, Cool.
Okay, I can move on now.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so let's move into fitness, fashion, health, wellness, that sort of basket, right? Let's just chuck
Yes.
four words
My
in.
basket.
Yeah,
Yes.
four words in that basket, right? But actually, I wanna touch on the mental health aspect,
Hmm.
and the role that the industry plays, within that. And particularly, magazines like Women's Health, Men's Health. What role do you think they positively play, in that space at the moment? Um, and I guess I also want to juxtapose that with an honest sort of reflection of, the journey over the years. How has that improved over the years from, where not necessarily just men's health, women's health, but actually the industry as a whole,
Hmm.
um, has moved, in that space as well.
I mean, I think the answer is the same for both questions, and that is mostly that the role I think we've played, but society has also allowed us to do it, is to destigmatize mental health. You
Yeah.
know, the fact is there's never been more conversations happening around mental health, and I think that that is fantastic because the
Mm,
more we speak about it, the more you don't feel like you're alone in this, the more you don't feel stigmatized by it, the more you feel like you can tell your friends and family that you're not feeling up to something, the
mm,
more that you don't feel that this is something to be ashamed of or something that genuinely is not a medical condition. It absolutely is. So, all of the trauma and stigma around the silencing of mental health, I think, has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And it has allowed titles like ours that are reputable and expert led with things like that to be able to speak about it more freely and have people read it. And especially, I think, in the male mental health space, I think
mm,
to really kind of read a piece like that and think it's okay to feel like this, and
mm,
it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to ask for help.
mm, mm.
And if nothing else, this pandemic has allowed us the opportunity to talk about things like that more so than we have ever spoken about them before, because for the first time, everybody, whether you like have never experienced any level of stress or anxiety to this degree, you're experiencing this year. And it gives some sort of inkling into how people who suffer from conditions like that feel all the time.
Yes.
And there's a level of kindness and acceptance that I think will come out of this that will be most welcome.
Mm, mm. And, do you think the industry's approach should be different for male and female, users? Do you think, in the mental health space, especially?
I don't think so, but I do believe that women are much easier at talking about their feelings.
Mm,
And it's a grand generalization, but I do think women are more open to discussing their feelings or not necessarily feeling particularly ashamed of feeling like that. And potentially they still do, but
yeah.
there's less so of those feelings of like, I need, or that sort of socially conscientized thing of like, I need to be a man. I can't cry. I can't
Yeah.
show my feelings. I can't be feeling like this. I
Mm,
think women are allow each other the space to be emotional together, and male friendships often don't have that outlet. And
yes.
you certainly don't feel like you maybe want to go and see a therapist or something like that. So I think it's more difficult for men to talk about their feelings
Mm,
traditionally,
mm.
and that's it's so it's not the approach that is different, but the fact that I do think that for men's health it gets a little bit trickier for them to address those subjects because they need to address them so desperately.
Yes, yeah. I actually, yeah, I find that really insightful, and I think, sort of destigmatizing, talking about it, and not making it a shameful thing for people to talk about, is
Absolutely.
something has been an important development, I think, in society, and I think, your industry has really played an incredibly important
Mm.
role, within that as well. Um, I'm going to ask you a question that you expect to be asked because you've actually mentioned it. But
Yes.
in terms in terms of health and wellness, right? So, what practical tips do you have?
Oh, with pleasure.
What
I
practical
think um, I think
tips?
the one thing that I always get asked, other than how I fit time hack things into my day, is what is the best exercise?
Yeah.
And my answer is always like, what is the best exercise is the one you enjoy. If you don't enjoy doing something, don't do it. If you think you should be running because you should be running, but you don't enjoy running, just don't run.
Done
It
right.
took me a long time to
Mm,
figure out that the thing that I enjoyed most was yoga. Really a long time, like 20 years, a long time.
right.
Um, and now it doesn't feel like a schlep or a chore or something that I need to do because I enjoy doing it.
Mm,
So it is about finding something it's about moving your body. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. You don't need to kill yourself. The other thing people always ask me is what is the best, especially the ladies, what is the best exercise for weight loss?
yeah.
And I will say that if you want to exercise for weight loss, the best thing you can do for yourself is buy a Sweat 1000 package when the gyms reopen. It
Mm,
is the most sweaty, kick your butt fun you'll ever have, but you will definitely lose weight because they are hardcore, those dudes, but it's such fun. Um, and I think that's what I love about fitness is that there is such an amazing community around it. If
mm,
you go to a small gym or a yoga studio, people all support you. Everyone knows who everyone else is and
yes.
they check on how you're doing. And, that amazing community is what I loved about being part of Women's Health. And it's what
Mm,
we wanted to create at Fit Not Out as well. That there
mm,
is no perfect body size, that it's not about being skinny, it's
I love-
about being strong and feeling confident. And if
mm,
exercise makes you feel like that, then that's the one that you should go for. The other tips for me, I try not to have too much sugar. So I
yeah.
don't add have refined sugar. I don't add sugar to anything. I don't really eat, I know, chocolates or cakes and sweets. I know some people have now just dropped the call because who wants to know that person that doesn't eat chocolates? And I do drink wine though,
Mm,
and I've also kind of swapped out quite a lot of dairy because I love, love, love having coffee. Not made by myself. I like ordering a delicious flat white or something in the morning, first thing in the morning when I got to work. It was part of the ritual. And the Vida at our local office used to call myself and my two colleagues normal, almond, and soya because they only knew our coffee milk orders and not our names. Um, and I was normal for years, but I am now almond as well. So there's that.
talk about
That's
character.
about yeah. That's
So
those are my
I
wellness hacks.
I am curious, so which are your favorite restaurants um to go to, both, I guess, actually, let's talk about Cape Town, but just to bring it home for
I'll give
both.
you one of each. I will.
I, just to bring it home for you and me, we must also talk about Joburg as well. Okay.
So my favorite restaurants, I mean, I love Mexican food and I love tapas. And I
Mm,
think I love them both for the same reason. I think partly they're a great treat meal out, but there is still a lot of healthy options. They're not particularly kind of deep fried, stodgy sort of meals. So in Cape Town, there's El Burro, which is an
yes.
amazing Mexican restaurant. There's one in Greenpoint, and there's a little taqueria that's close to my house. So there are lots of vegan and non-meat options. If you were so inclined, there are lots of gluten-free options because the tortillas are all corn.
Mm,
There's loads of fishy things and stuff like that. So there's a lot of variety, but all really healthy. And they make a killer margarita, which of course just brings me endless joy. And then in Joburg, I'd have to say my favorite restaurant in Joburg is probably La Boqueria, which
I,
is in Parktown North. It's an amazing Spanish tapas. Same thing. Like you can get lots of delicious things. It all feels indulgent, but it's healthy. Like they do these amazing bowls of olives that I could actually just weep for. That will
I,
be the joy that I have when travel reopens and I get to come to Joburg for a reason.
I love that. I remember. I think Albura is they used. I think I'm not sure if it's still there, but there used to be one in what's this place called, in Newlands. Actually, I think there was one in
Oh,
Newlands.
there could be one in Newlands. Yes.
Yeah, I think there used to be one in Newlands next to my favorite ice cream place, which I was frequently
Oh,
seen
you
in.
see, I scream.
I was frequently seen in their couple times a month. So it's like
There we go.
so I want us to chat a little bit about the changes in the magazine world in 2020, right? So
Mhm.
2020 has been yeah, that year.
Decimated.
Yes, it's been insane. And already I think the world of print media was already taking a bit of strain pre the pandemic. So I actually want to exclude the current situation out of that. I actually want to talk about
Agreed.
before the pandemic already print media was we saw a number of print media houses starting to close down, and all of that. So already there was that bit of strain. um,
Mm.
I want to understand from you, how have you had to adapt over the years? Perhaps if it's a shift to digital, or if it's
Mhm.
actually, reinventing print. It's actually funny because there are currently in this situation right now, there are actually magazines which are launching right in print as well. So like you know, it's not always doom and gloom, but I'm actually quite curious, taking the current situation out of things, how have you had to adapt to, over the years?
So I think for us, I mean, my answer has always to that question for quite a long time now. So excuse my fingers there while I plug that in. My answer to that has always been that print was never it was never bound to survive forever.
Mm,
The brands that were going to make it were the media brands that allowed the opportunity to for you to experience their content on many different platforms. So yes, wonderful that you get to have a beautiful magazine on shelf, but you also need to have a thriving community on digital platforms, so across Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and even Pinterest, and some brands obviously are already on TikTok and platforms like that. So to be able to engage with readers, it's still content. You're just publishing it on a different platform.
mm,
Um, and I think for us as media brands, we've had to be really cognizant of that and kind of figuring out where our content lives best. So you're creating a piece of content. Is this a piece that's going to be going into print? Is it small or big? Does it need a photo shoot? Does it need a video? Is it just a simple caption? Is it something that can be stripped into something much bigger and turned into like a massive big pay gate or a bookazine? I
mm,
think that really has been the journey that traditional magazine media has been on, certainly over the last almost, I mean, close to 10 years probably, but never more so felt than right now, when suddenly for the first time ever, people were not actually able to get to stores where they could even pick up something that was a hard copy on shelf.
yes.
The interesting thing with lifestyle media, and I guess with all media, is the fact that people still want content. One often gets quoted around those stats about print dying and print being dead. The reality is people still desperately want content, and in an age of fake news, they are looking for reputable expert-led content even more so than ever, because they've learned, savvy readers have also learned, that it's very easy to dupe them if they don't know the source of
Mm,
their information. So I think that yes, a lot has changed, but a lot is also solidified for media brands that know what they're doing.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think print will, the fact is what this pandemic has done, and I know you said don't talk about it in the context of this year, but I think that what it has done for many different industries is it's brought 5-year plans forward to right now. So things that maybe were on a slow decline, like for example print, and the fact is that we would have shifted out of print and into other media probably without there ever really being much, or certainly maybe not a monthly print magazine, but something quarterly, or a shift completely into digital, or whatever it might have been. Those things are now happening right now,
yeah.
and that's across many industries, not just print media.
And so, I mean, how do you see this playing out, right? Is there a space, for digital media to be consumed in the same way as print media? So I'm talking now magazine, flip, um, now
Yeah. I mean, a
Swipe.
PDF of a a PDF of a magazine is never the same experience,
No,
right? But the
yeah.
joy of a magazine, and I mean, I'm going to sound like such a pain in the ass now, but but back in the old days,
Mm,
as a band or a musician, you would release an entire album, and if
yeah.
somebody wanted to listen to your song, they would have to buy the whole
I,
album and experience every
yes.
bit of what you put together. They wouldn't just get the song, which now, obviously, the way that streaming services work, you get the song. You don't necessarily need to get the entire album and hear the whole story.
Mm,
Magazines are a little bit like that in that way. It's a curation of content meant to serve you and complement each other. So on digital, yes, you can get the stories. You can get the stories in exactly the same way.
mm,
You can get the exact same content, like to the same degree that you would find in a mag. The difference is the packaging.
mm,
And what magazines allowed you to do was to somebody else curated a really beautiful, well thought out package for you. So it's not that the information would be any different if it moved to a digital platform. It's just the experience is different because the curation is not there.
so do you see a shift more being towards building respective brands, right? So, and that
For
manifesting
sure.
both in print, rather, as opposed to say, okay, we're binning print now, right? Right? Because there still, I think, is a space for
I
print,
think that
right? Aside
I
from
think
global
there is a
pandemic.
space for print. Yeah.
So
I
aside from global
think that
pandemic, like there still
yeah,
is.
exactly. Aside from that small thing, I think there
Yeah.
is whether there I don't know that there will necessarily in the long term be a space for print magazines as we know them as monthlies. I
Mm,
think that we will see a shift to very different frequencies where you'll get beautiful print magazines that'll be more expensive and that will come out less frequently. And I
yes.
think that there is going to be a big shift out of mass market print titles, including things like the kind of stuff we do, into more niche health and wellness titles, more
Yeah.
niche in all different ways. And I think
Mm,
that that indie magazine scene is where you're going to see new titles coming into the fore. And they're not going to be the big, all dominating titles that you once had on the playing in the global arena. I think
yes.
the days of those big hold all massive titles and international licenses and things like that are definitely that's sort of those glory days of print. I think are pretty much behind us.
Mm,
But what you will see coming in play is indie titles, smaller niche titles, and beautiful sort of quarterlies, bi-monthlies. Those kind of magazines will also be looking
mm.
at. So I think frequency more than anything is what's going to change. So the
So
shelves will look very different.
yes, yeah, that's so interesting. What advice would you have to somebody who, you know, said, Danielle, I want to launch a magazine right now? And I know he said that not going to talk about the current situation, right? We're just going to pretend that, you know, but
It's not
let
happening.
yeah, no, let's now, unfortunately accept the current reality. Um, somebody who, like yourself, wanted to, when you launched Grazia, wants to launch
Mm.
something now. Um, in the current situation, should they press on? Should they stay
Oh
put?
my gosh. My answer would probably be the same no matter when you'd ask me, and it was have lots of money. Lots of money. I think magazine publishing is relentless because of your frequency. So if you don't make the money that you need to make on that issue, you still need to be getting the next issue out. You can
Yes.
get yourself into a hole in terms of your profit and loss really quickly if you're
Mm,
not careful. So actually magazine publishing is is a business. And I think that because magazines are such a beautiful creative space, it's often not how people immediately perceive them. They think of them as beautiful creative spaces for content and photography and design, and they are all of those things, but they also need to be run like a very smart business.
mm,
So my
mm.
answer would be by all means, but keep your costs low and keep your interests niche,
Yeah.
and know that there is an appetite within that audience for that type of content.
I love that. I love that. Danielle, as a final question, I have a question from one of our listeners who, says, I'm a massive fan of Danielle. So I want to ask,
Excellent.
I want to ask her, how does she stay creative?
So I guess again we're going to have to talk outside of the pandemic because
Mm,
I find it very, very difficult this year to be. I have really found it difficult to be creative in 2020. I can't
yeah.
believe I started this year calling it 20 plenty. I mean, what a joke. There's been absolutely nothing freaking plenty about this year at all. But anyway, I think outside of the glory of 20 plenty, the way that I like to stay creative is to surround myself with smart people who challenge me and who also challenge my opinion.
Mm,
And I like to be inspired by I read, and I'm still a voracious reader of everything from fiction to other magazines to digital spaces and blogs and Instagram. I'm a massive consumer of content still, and I find that very inspiring. I used to, back in the olden days, find travel very inspiring. I love nothing more than being in a new place and being able to. I found a lot of my own creativity stimulated by being outside of my normal circumstances, so traveling in any way. Um, and I loved tapping into interesting people and hearing people speak. I still find that extremely interesting, and I think that has been a great plus of this global lockdown is being able to virtually hear and tap into seminars or webinars or Insta live chats or whatever it might be with people
mm,
that you otherwise ordinarily wouldn't have access to, or you'd have to pay an extraordinary amount of money
yeah.
to be able to go to an international conference or something like that. So I love listening to smart people, whether they're within my own team or organization or conferences and things. I find them very inspiring. And
Mm,
I find I still consume a huge amount of content across the whole gamut. And that for me is how I try and stay creatively motivated. But creativity is a democracy. For me, it's a democracy.
mm.
Creativity feeds on other people. It's not a one-man show. Um, I'm at my best when I have a team and I can put out ideas and we can thrash them out together.
Mm, I absolutely love that. Danielle, this has been a fantastic chat. I can't believe that, we've like that's just happened. Like that was so it
Good.
felt like a breeze. So I just want to thank you so much for coming onto the platform, for
It's
being a
such
guest
a pleasure.
the show. I thoroughly enjoyed our chats. I thoroughly enjoyed picking your mind on certain topics. I think there's so much more that we could talk about. We sort of touched on here and there on some of the initiatives that you're up to, but I really, I think sometime in the future on this platform is not going away. This platform is here to stay for the long term. I'd love to have you back on the show once again
I would
to
love that.
discuss. So I just want to thank you so much for inspiring us
It's
and
such a
for
pleasure.
and I think this has been a wonderful chat, and I hope that you've also enjoyed it as well.
I did. Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute honor to be part of this convo. I really enjoyed it.
No, awesome, Danielle. Thank you so much. Until we see you back on the show again, please do keep well, keep safe, and stay healthy.
Thank you. And you too. Cheers, Stefan. Thank you.
Bye.